In the previous spoiler, it was mentioned that Wang Lin, though severely injured, managed to retrieve Wanner from the cycle of reincarnation, buying her some time of survival. During his healing and recuperation, the arrival of the Vermilion Bird Kingdom's envoy and deity whose group broke the silence of his retreat. Regarding the challenge letter, Wang Lin ignored the Vermilion Bird Kingdom's face and postponed the battle for 10 years. The envoy, although feeling helpless, had no choice but to return with Wang Lin's decision. After hearing the news, an elder from Vermilion Mountain became furious and planned to send a powerful figure to capture Wang Lin, regardless of life or death. However, a mysterious figure from the top of Vermilion Mountain reappeared to protect Wang Lin. Ultimately, the elder had to suppress his anger and decided to wait another 10 years. Deity Hu, upon learning that Wang Lin was the famous powerful figure named Zhang Niu, speculated that Wang Lin must have some divine energy from the immortal realm that could aid in breaking through the infant transformation stage, and offered to exchange it at any cost. However, Wang Lin was not interested in trading, instead shifting the conversation to the immortal remains land. After all, the divine energy from the immortal realm was incredibly precious, and acquiring more of it would be nearly impossible. Meanwhile, Zixin tried to tempt Wang Lin to join them with the presence of the reincarnation tree, in their journey to the immortal remains land. However, Wang Lin was not interested. After all, the reincarnation tree's function was minimal for him, not enough to make him take risks. Of course, the reincarnation tree also wasn't of great significance to Deity Hu, which sparked Wang Lin's curiosity. In fact, Deity Hu's real purpose for agreeing to join Zixin was not the reincarnation tree, but the reincarnation fruit. This fruit could greatly increase the success rate of breaking through the infant transformation stage. For Wang Lin, the reincarnation fruit could not only help his clone breakthrough but also assist his main body in evolving. Through his ancient god memories, he learned that the reincarnation fruit had body cleansing effects, accelerating the absorption of spiritual power, and gradually evolving into a terrifying force. This was also why the ancient gods were constantly hunted, as places where they existed usually lacked spiritual power, making cultivation difficult for others. However, ancient gods were immensely powerful, and many hunters were eventually suppressed by them. Although the reincarnation fruit was highly attractive, the immortal remains land contained a mysterious power that even the Vermilion Bird Kingdom feared. This power was from the remnants of the original natives of Vermilion Star. And as the sacred object of these natives, the reincarnation tree was naturally under strict surveillance. This was why Zixin kept inviting deity transformation cultivators to join them. After all, those natives, who even the Vermilion Bird Kingdom couldn't completely eradicate, were incredibly strong in battle. Hence, Wang Lin had to consider carefully. Despite the danger in the immortal remains land, the huge benefits of the reincarnation fruit still made it hard for Wang Lin to resist. Not only could it increase his combat strength, but it could also help him face the Heaven's Tao reincarnation power 19 years later. Thus, to increase his survival chances, Wang Lin began preparing carefully. By chance, Wang Lin had a sudden inspiration. He took out the severed arm from his battle with Hong Dai and, using his ancient god memories, began to refine and seal it. This process was like a curse. While the arm was being refined, it also had a significant effect on Hong Dai's main body, causing her immense pain as she struggled to break free from the connection. However, this action thoroughly enraged Hong Dai's senior brother, who was filled with murderous intent and wished to kill Wang Lin immediately. However, since Vermilion Mountain had issued an order, he couldn't act rashly and instead secretly instructed a lower-level cultivation nation to deal with Wang Lin. In fact, Hong Dai had already obtained a treasure capable of regenerating the severed arm. Yet, she chose not to restore it, instead using this hatred to temper her Dao heart, making her foundation even more solid. She swore, before she personally killed Wang Lin, her severed arm would never regenerate. After refining Hong Dai's severed arm, Wang Lin began to assess his combat power. Undoubtedly, his strongest trump card remained the god-slaying war chariot obtained from the immortal realm. However, this treasure consumed an enormous amount of spiritual power, and with his current level, it would be difficult to control it for long, and it might even backfire. Therefore, Wang Lin decided to adjust his combat power strategy, starting by retrieving the beast control mark from the Thunder Frog. Despite being heavily injured, Wang Lin did not abandon the Thunder Frog but instead helped it recover. As a high-level spirit beast, it naturally understood gratitude. Even after losing the beast control mark, the Thunder Frog chose to stay and fight alongside Wang Lin. In return, Wang Lin promised to treat it like he did the mosquito beast and offer it true companionship, helping it increase its power within his capabilities. After retrieving the beast control mark, Wang Lin transferred it to the soul beast of the god-slaying war chariot. After several attempts, the mark was successfully placed, and the soul beast immediately lost its resistance. However, Wang Lin quickly sensed his spiritual power being crazily devoured by the soul beast, as if the floodgates had opened, bringing him close to exhaustion. Had it not been for the high-grade spirit stones in his possession to replenish his power, he might have perished due to the depletion of spiritual energy. Even so, he consumed an entire high-grade spirit stone to stop the soul beast from devouring any more. This demonstrated that the beast's power far surpassed that of the thunder frog, but its consumption of spiritual energy was exponentially greater. In order to gain more from the trip to the Immortal Remains land, Wang Lin entered the treasure tower to seek an immortal sword. However, instead of an immortal sword, his attention was drawn to a giant sword. After thinking for a long time, Wang Lin suddenly realized that this giant sword was the same one he had chosen years ago at the Hangyu sect. Later, in the Immortal Realm, when his storage bag was torn apart by spatial fragments, the giant sword had vanished. Unexpectedly, it had been summoned when the female immortal summoned the rain sword. Wang Lin was surprised to find that this giant sword seemed to have some connection to the immortal sword. Unfortunately, the giant sword had lost its sword soul, making it difficult to unleash its full power. Wang Lin attempted to fill the gap in the sword soul with many wandering souls in his possession, but this still did not fully unlock the potential of the giant sword. Ultimately, he decided to wait for the future, hoping that if he could capture a devouring soul, he could merge it into the giant sword to potentially increase its power. After dealing with everything, Wang Lin returned to the village and visited Wanner, who had been transformed into a baby girl. He then set off for the Immortal Remains land. However, just as Wang Lin was about to embark on his journey to the Immortal Remains land, a potential crisis was quietly brewing behind the scenes. The end of the ancient god body was approaching, and the signs of its decay were becoming more apparent, causing the seals and barriers to loosen. If this continued, soon Tuosen would break free from the restrictions and return to the mortal world. At this time, Wang Lin was completely unaware of this, unknowingly planting a ticking time bomb for his future. On his way to the gathering place for the Immortal Remains land expedition, Wang Lin encountered a wild man who attempted to ambush him but was ultimately killed by Wang Lin. Wang Lin brought the wild man's head to the gathering point where Deity Hu and his group had assembled. Upon seeing the number of leaves on the wild man's forehead, Deity Hu immediately recognized that he was not a purebred wild man, but a cultivator who had been parasitized and catalyzed. What puzzled Deity Hu even more was why Wang Lin would encounter such wild men, who typically didn't live on the ground. This suggested that there were some changes underground that might trigger unknown dangers, adding more hidden risks for everyone seeking opportunities in the Immortal Remains land. Despite their concerns, the group, well aware of the coexistence of risk and reward, chose to continue into the deep pit to search for treasures. When Wang Lin's group reached the first layer of the deep pit, Wang Lin discovered that the terrain was vast, and his divine sense could not fully cover it. After confirming the direction with Deity Hu and Zixin, they flew toward the entrance to the second layer. However, on the way to the second layer's entrance, Wang Lin's group encountered nearly 10 wild men who attacked them. The most powerful among them was a wild man with 2 leaves on his forehead, whose strength was comparable to the later stage of the core formation. The appearance of a core formation level wild man in the first layer of the deep pit undoubtedly indicated that Wang Lin's group's journey would not be peaceful. Moreover, according to Zixin's information, their target was in the third layer, and the obstacles before them were just the beginning. After successfully entering the second layer, new threats emerged one after another. Not long after, they encountered a wild man with 3 leaves whose strength was comparable to the nascent soul stage. Unlike before, this wild man was not a parasitized cultivator, but a legitimate wild man. These wild men had overwhelming advantages in both cultivation and battle skills, making them even more terrifying. In comparison, parasitized wild men were more like mindless beasts, relying on brute force to attack. Although these parasitized wild men had a simple attack method, they could still cope well as long as their strength was sufficient. The legitimate wild men, however, were completely different. They had rich combat experience, were able to use the surrounding environment to their advantage, and could even command lower-level wild men in battle, making combat far more complicated. However, despite the 3-leaf wild man possessing intelligence, he stood no chance against Wang Lin's overwhelming strength. Realizing the danger, he immediately attempted to flee, but was still struck down by Wang Lin. Shortly after, a 5-leaf wild man, whose strength was comparable to the deity transformation stage, appeared, making the situation even more dangerous. The group quickly scattered to evade, but the 5-leaf wild man locked onto Wang Lin and pursued him. Wang Lin's mind moved, and the forbidden banner was quickly deployed. However, wild men fought differently from cultivators. They didn't rely on spiritual energy but used the runes on their bodies. These runes absorbed and integrated the powers of the demonic beasts beneath the deep pit, making the wild man's strength closely tied to the number of runes on his body. The five-leaf wild man, with its powerful rune strength, was able to contend with the forbidden banner's power, creating a deadlock in the battle. Eventually, Wang Lin, with the cooperation of the giant sword and the thunder frog, was able to kill the five-leaf wild man. After slaying the five-leaf wild man, Wang Lin flew toward the gathering point at the entrance to the third layer. On the way, he detected two wild men, an elder and a young one, acting unusually, so he flew toward them. The two sides exchanged glances but did not act. It turned out that the elder wild man was helping the young one hunt demonic beasts to enhance his runes. Wang Lin quietly observed the process without intervening. Despite the elder wild man having 6-leaf strength, making him extremely powerful, he was cautious of Wang Lin's strength. Considering that Wang Lin had not attacked earlier, he truthfully informed Wang Lin that the third layer contains 7-leaf wild men comparable to the infant transformation stage, hoping to dissuade him. However, Wang Lin did not retreat and still decided to go to the entrance to the third layer. When Wang Lin arrived at the gathering point at the entrance to the third layer, he found only Master Qiu, Deity Hu, and 2 core formation cultivators brought by Deity Hu. From Master Qiu, Wang Lin learned that recently, while Deity Hu had been killing the 5-leaf wild men, an incident had occurred that left Deity Hu in a state of confusion. Wang Lin immediately used the forbidden banner to imprison Deity Hu and attempted to awaken him. Deity Hu, taking advantage of his brief moment of clarity, told Wang Lin that only at the brink of death could he fully rid himself of the influence of the runes that the nearly 6-leaf wild man had catalyzed into his body before dying. With his current strength, in this brutal deep pit filled with a violent aura, he could only barely resist the corrosion of the runes. If it continued any longer, it would only be a matter of time before he became a puppet. Without hesitation, Wang Lin swung the giant sword down from above, aiming for Deity Hu's head. Had it not been for his precise control of strength, stopping immediately after the runes collapsed, Deity Hu would certainly have perished. Deity Hu was grateful, but the overwhelming strength displayed by Wang Lin made him even more wary. After all, Wang Lin's ability to reach the gathering point unharmed had clearly shown the immense gap between them. Having not seen Zixin arrive, Deity Hu and Wang Lin decided, after discussion, not to wait any longer and to head straight for the third layer. After all, the strength of the cultivator protecting Zixin was far inferior to that of Deity Hu and Wang Lin. Whether he could safely bring Zixin to the gathering point was still uncertain. Moreover, staying in one place for too long was not a wise decision. The longer they stayed, the greater the chance of encountering wild men. Upon reaching the third layer, Deity Hu finally revealed the reason for bringing the core formation cultivators into this dangerous place. It turned out that their lifespans could catalyze the reincarnation fruit. This was clearly a hint for Wang Lin to help protect these 2 core formation cultivators. After all, the wild men were incredibly powerful, and it would be difficult for Deity Hu alone to protect multiple people at once. In such circumstances, the strategy of separating and protecting each person individually seemed much wiser. As they continued their exploration of the third layer, would the 7-leaf wild men truly appear? Could Wang Lin once again use the giant sword to defeat the powerful enemies, or would he have to rely on the god-slaying chariot? Stay tuned for the next spoiler. I will reveal it all for you. Well, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching this video. Wish you a wonderful day.